For years, we've seen skyrocketing housing costs, chronic and tremendous home shortages in rental and buying markets, which were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Even though many cities have come out of pandemic economic slumps and some businesses are returning to pre-pandemic norms, most urban areas still face continual and worsening housing problems and commercial vacancies at the same time. I live in Boston. This past winter, we saw a 17% increase in people experiencing homelessness and similar levels of increased families staying in shelters and transitional housing. The median home price in Boston is over $1 million. The median rent is over $3,000 a month. And as I experienced while looking for a place to live this year, if someone makes less than $50,000 a year, most landlords won't even accept your application. The problem is not specific to Boston. In a recent survey of mayors across all 50 US states, over 70% say their cities need significantly more housing, but there is a lack of affordable housing for low and middle income families. Additionally, they report a lack of funding and limited availability of land to build more housing. In Canada, where I used to live, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp estimate the country needs to add 3.5 million homes by 2030 to restore affordability, which is unlikely to be achieved given the current political and economic climate. While it's true there isn't nearly enough residential stock everywhere to meet demands, many other buildings are actually sitting partially or mostly empty. According to data from JLL, office vacancies in the US reached a record 20.1% in 2023. This equates to about 1 billion square feet of vacant offices. That amount is so staggering, it's almost impossible to visualize. If it was put in one office building with a 20,000 square foot floor plate, it would be almost 20 times taller than Mount Everest. These trends are expected to climb further due to hybrid work trends, more businesses defaulting on their loans, and a third of all office leasing expiring by 2026. Construction of new offices are also slowed due to rising construction costs, continued supply chain shortages, and low rates of real estate development fueled by high interest rates and volatility in the market. All these offices sitting empty cause so many compounding problems. It leads to lower retail traffic and public transit usage, which means businesses and governments lose revenue. That results in lost jobs, lost tax revenue, lost city services, fewer community programs, higher rates of crime, more mental health and drug addiction problems, worsening pressure on healthcare systems, more deteriorating infrastructure, the list goes on. All these lead to even emptier cities, and then we're in a vicious doom cycle. COVID didn't create these problems. They've been growing for many years. The pandemic just accelerated them. Amid this huge crisis, I'm sure most of you are wondering, why aren't we converting these empty offices into residential housing? Well, actually we are, but it's certainly not enough, and it's not happening at a rate that's even close to what's needed. A 2022 study found that if even 40% of unleased space in San Francisco converted to housing, it would create over 11,000 units. Here in historic downtown Boston, only 4% of properties are residential. So why aren't there more residential developments? There are so many complex and compounding reasons. Not all buildings are physically suitable for residential use. They might be in poor condition. They don't have the right mechanical and electrical systems. Zoning, building code, and other regulations may pose barriers. The building might not be in a suitable location, and sometimes it's just not feasible or practical to convert them. Most modern office buildings have wide and deep floor plates, usually more than 25,000 square feet or 2,300 square meters. I guess that's like half a football field for my American friends, or for the Canadians, like 1.5 hockey rinks. These are usually way too big to accommodate residential units. They would lead to unusually narrow and inefficient layouts where most spaces have no access to natural light. Some older office buildings, such as early 20th century skyscrapers, may be more suitable for residential. Think of these private eye suites from film noir, for example. However, sometimes the geometries of those buildings also don't align with effective residential space planning. Structural columns could be in the way of proper interior wall locations. Some window spacing just doesn't let you properly divide rooms and units. Finding the right floor plate for a residential building is like Goldilocks. It needs to be just right. Then there's the trouble with building envelopes. Most commercial office buildings don't have windows that can open because Their air supply and ventilation are usually centrally controlled through a mechanical system. But some municipalities require residential dwellings to have operable windows for fresh air. So you would need to replace exterior windows and redesign the building's air supply and ventilation system. Very often, that's just not practical. Again, in this case, older commercial buildings usually have operable windows that are once again more suitable. However, while some older buildings have suitable physical traits and charming historic character, often they're not in great shape. You might need to replace all the windows anyway because they don't meet contemporary energy requirements. Most older buildings also have leaky exterior assemblies that are incredibly energy inefficient, so the entire building envelope might need to be bulked up or completely stripped and rebuilt. If you're working with a protected heritage building, you actually can't tear down the exterior facade, so the solution often is to build another exterior layer behind the old facade, which dramatically reduces your floor plate, creating even more inefficiencies. Older buildings' mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems also often need major upgrades or be completely replaced to meet contemporary living needs and current building and energy codes. I work on a lot of retrofit projects. Generally, electrical loads are maxed out, even in buildings from 30 to 40 years ago, and there's often not enough fresh air supply or proper ventilation. There are also other zoning and code-related challenges which vary from state to state and city to city. Zoning usually requires owners to apply for a variance when they're changing the use from what it was zoned for. These variances can be difficult to get and usually add many months to a project schedule. Even when you get the variance approved, there may still be code-related upgrades, restrictions, and approval needed from other city agencies. Unfortunately, some buildings just don't meet certain requirements. For example, many commercial buildings don't meet planning code required open space minimums. In San Francisco, the city requires 25% of units to have 2 bedrooms or more, which a lot of buildings can't accommodate. I know what you're thinking. We just need to get rid of government bureaucrats and their annoying red tape. Yes, it's frustrating, but a lot of building codes are there for our health, safety, and well-being, and we can't just throw it all out the window. California especially has several required seismic, aka earthquake-proofing upgrades that get triggered when converting from commercial to residential use. So yeah, converting an office building to housing is way more than just throwing up some walls and doors. It can take time and have a significant cost. Building owners and developers who pursue this could be taking a huge risk, so they need it to be worth the cost. The value generated from these developments needs to be enough to make that money back. Unfortunately, even the most luxurious residential units don't generate the same revenue as commercial units of the same size. This essentially means that for most office to residential conversions to be considered economically feasible, private developers will need government support, like tax incentives, cash grants, credits and rebates, waived development fees, zoning reforms, expedited processes, and probably all of the above. And some cities are doing it. Back in 2021, Calgary was experiencing commercial vacancy rates of 32%. They were already facing a vacancy crisis of 24% before the pandemic, so they conducted comprehensive research and made a coordinated action plan. They introduced a development incentive program that included an expedited planning approval process and provided developers with up to $75 per square foot in grants. In 2023, Boston announced the Downtown Office to Residential Conversion Pilot Program that could reduce building owners' residential tax rates by 75% for up to 29 years and provide additional tax reductions to those who take on office to residential conversions. Mayor Michelle Wu indicated this program is to not only add to the city's housing stock, but also to generate more 24/7 foot traffic downtown. As I'm making this video only a couple months after this announcement, I don't know if it'll work yet, but if you're watching in the future, I guess let me know. In 2020, architecture and design company Gensler developed a proprietary tool to evaluate factors that contribute to a good residential building, like site context, building form, floor plates, envelope, and servicing. Since then, they have studied over 900 buildings across North America. Unfortunately, the studies show only 20 to 30% of commercial buildings are a good fit for residential conversion. But some cities score better than others. Of the 90 buildings studied in Boston so far, 30 to 40% warrant current consideration for conversion. That alone totals 3 to 5 million square feet. While it's disappointing to learn that the majority of buildings are not suitable for residential transformation, this tool actually shows us how there are a lot of places where it is feasible. It helps to identify where we can make the biggest impact in revitalizing our cities and convince developers that they don't need to tear down or build new to create opportunities. After all, the most sustainable building is one that's already built. Studies have shown that adaptive reuse of existing buildings can cut a project's embodied carbon by 80%. Not having to build new buildings also reduces or eliminates other environmental impacts, such as smog creation, water and soil pollution, and other ecological disruptions. Yes, converting office buildings to residential is no small feat, but it's achievable and it offers solutions to some of the biggest challenges we face today. The pandemic fundamentally changed the way we live and work, and partially helped us realize that mono-zoned office districts, which often become crime-ridden ghost towns outside of 9 to 5, were bad ideas in the first place. So I live in downtown Boston. Of course, I have a personal interest in improving the conditions of my surroundings. However, even if you live outside of city centers or in suburban areas, this affects all of us. Downtown buildings generate a disproportionate share of a city's tax revenue. When city centers decline, everyone is affected by funding cuts to social services, schools, and public infrastructure. It's easy for us to blame governments for not taking enough action, developers for being only driven by profits, or architects for, well, in my experience, we get blamed for everything, but that's not the point. If we all work together, governments can initiate transformative programs and create job opportunities. Real estate developers can increase profits by diversifying their portfolios, allowing the rest of us to create vibrant and diverse communities and bring life back into our cities. If you're interested in learning more about Boston's urban design, or ever thought Boston feels a lot less like an American city and more like a European city, you might be onto something and should check out a video I made in collaboration with my friends at Curious Muse. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, comment, or drop me a small tip in my coffee tip jar. Bye for now.